All right, let's just jump right in. I want you to picture this, a massive clash of worlds. On one side, you've got the super sterile scientific environment of a modern psychiatric hospital. And on the other, the deep spiritual world of traditional healing. And who's caught smack in the middle of all of this? The healthcare workers, just trying to make sense of it all.
So this brings up a really powerful question, doesn't it? I mean, imagine you're trained to see the world through a microscope, to look for biological causes. But you were raised to see the world through the wisdom of your ancestors. What happens when a patient's crisis could be explained by both? Who or what wins in that moment? That's the exact conflict we're going to unpack today. You see, in South Africa, you basically have two completely separate, powerful healing systems running at the same time. You've got the Western medical model. You know the drill. It's all about diagnosing mental illness based on psychology and biology. But then you have traditional African healing, which is, well, it's holistic in the truest sense of the word. It doesn't draw a line between the mind and the body, or between an individual and their community, or even between the living and the ancestral spirits. It's all connected. Now, let's meet the people who are living this reality every single day. We're talking about Xhosa psychiatric nurses. Professionally, they are trained in and work within the super strict framework of Western psychiatry. But personally, they come from a Xhosa culture that's just steeped in this traditional cosmology. They are the living, breathing connection point between these two completely different paradigms. And if you look at their professional identity, it's crystal clear. I mean, 100% of their training is based on the Western psychiatric model. They're learning about psychotropic drugs, diagnostic manuals, psychotherapy, the whole shebang. So by every single professional metric, they are agents of modern scientific medicine. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast, because what happens when they punch out and go home? That's where it gets really fascinating. A study found that 3/4 of these same nurses have consulted a traditional healer themselves. And get this, a staggering 89% actively perform traditional customs, like rituals for their ancestors. So professionally, they live in one world, but personally, they are deeply rooted in another. You know, there's actually a name for this internal tug of war. It's called cultural dissonance. It's that psychological tension you feel when you hold two completely contradictory beliefs at the exact same time. For these nurses, it's a daily thing, believing in the power of an antidepressant while also understanding that a patient's suffering might come from displeased ancestors. But look, this isn't just an individual struggle. The conflict these nurses are feeling inside, it's basically a mirror of a much, much larger conversation that's happening all across South Africa. The entire healthcare system is being forced to ask, how do we get these two worlds to actually talk to each other? And if you want to know why this is such a critical issue, just look at where patients are actually going for help. Among urban Black populations in South Africa, traditional healers and faith healers are by far the preferred choice. Psychiatrists, they're way down at the bottom of the list. So the system literally can't afford to ignore these healers. They have the trust of the community. So what do the nurses, the ones caught right in the middle, think we should do about it? Well, here's the kicker. An incredible 75% of them are in favor of creating a formal referral system between hospitals and traditional healers. Yeah, despite all their internal conflicts and their Western training, they see collaboration as the only real path forward. Okay, but building that bridge, it is not easy, and the very same nurses who are calling for collaboration are also the ones who see the biggest risks. They have some very real and very valid concerns about what that kind of integration would actually look like in practice. And we're not talking about abstract fears here. The nurses are worried about charlatans, people with no real training just preying on vulnerable people. They're worried about a total lack of regulation. But most critically, they've seen the potential for actual life-threatening harm, like a healer telling a patient with schizophrenia to just stop taking their medication. That's a life-or-death situation. One nurse in the study just laid it all out there, and you can really feel the frustration in her words. She said most patients who visit traditional healers end up coming to the hospital anyway. For them, this isn't some academic debate, This is about seeing patients get worse before they get better. So if they're stuck in this impossible conflict, and they see all the risks so clearly, where do we possibly go from here? Well, this is where the story takes a really interesting turn, because it turns out that their position in the middle isn't just a point of tension. It's a position of unique power to actually forge a new way forward. To cope with this constant cultural dissonance, the nurses pretty much follow one of three paths. A small number go for assimilation. They just fully reject their traditional beliefs and go all in on the Western model.
Others stay in a state of ambivalence, just constantly torn between the two. But the majority, they choose integration. They are actively trying to find ways to make both of these worldviews coexist, both in their jobs and inside themselves.
And that right there is the biggest takeaway of all. These nurses aren't just victims of some big cultural clash. They are what the research calls hermeneutics. It's a fancy word, but it just means they're the interpreters. They're the translators. By living in that gap every single day and working to reconcile these two systems, they are the ones, literally, the ones, creating a new, more culturally aware, and ultimately a more effective way of practicing mental health care.
So even though this whole story is rooted in the Xhosa experience, it leaves us with a pretty universal question to chew on. Think about it. Whether it's about spirituality or family or diet or tradition, how well does the healthcare system where you live truly see and understand and respect the cultural worlds of the very people it's supposed to be serving?